Welcome back to episode 2 of the Tennis Doctors, three physicians talking about the world of professional men's tennis. Joining me, Bilal Ahmed. Bilal, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
And Arjun Watane. Arjun, welcome back.
Yep, glad to be back.
All right, so we're going to dive right into our last episode was right after Roland Garros. We got grass season going on right now. 2 big tournaments wrapped up today in Queens, in England, Halle, in Germany. Before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit. ATP had some interesting announcements about what they want to do with tennis going forward, and probably overdue. I think we're all in medicine. I think medicine and tennis are interesting combo because I think both are fields that have this culture of tradition. They have really smart, talented people in them, and yet they're both really slow to adapt to changes. They're never first. Medicine's the last field to adapt to computers and technology, and tennis is very similar, has not adapted the way other sports have. We could probably spend an hour talking about this stuff, and we'll probably come back after Wimbledon and talk more about this during the time between grass and hard court season. But Arjun, give us an overview. What did they announce, and what do you think will come down the pipeline with this announcement?
Yeah, so one vision. It seems like it's a way for financial interests to be more transparent between tournaments, between players, and really allow a transparency between all the institutions involved in tennis. So there's whatever money flow is going on, it's equally distributed between players and the tournaments and the organizers of tournaments, who probably make a lot more money than the players itself. So it's a way to balance out all the financials. So hopefully it's a good thing. And I know Bilal had some thoughts as well for it.
Yeah. So I was just reading into this a little bit more, and the ATP's been having this in the works since about 2020 now. And the point is to generate more revenue, as Arjun mentioned, using aggregation of media rights, focusing on streamlining their product offerings and increasing the number of premium tournaments to provide like a better fan experience. Overall, that the main point is that tennis is the 4th most popular sport in the world with 1 billion fans. Golf is the 12th most popular sport, but golf generates 2.5% of like global media rights, whereas tennis only generates 1.3%. So they're trying to reposition their strategic plan in terms of media content, expanding the amount of premium tournaments. So you'll see over the next couple of years until 2025, Shanghai, Madrid, Rome, Cincinnati, and the Canada Masters are all going to be expanding to a 12-day format to allow more premium experience and to kind of add to that for the fans. And then on top of that as well, they're now going to be splitting the financial distribution of revenues from tournaments 50-50 between players and the tournaments, and also kind of sharing the auditing and the financial backing of what's going on behind the scenes in the tournament to the players, which is kind of new and exciting too, for the players to have more transparency and see what goes on behind the scenes. So I think it's just a cool new direction for the game. I think it kind of aligns the visions of the players and the tournaments and kind of limits that friction that can be there probably at times. So I think it'll be exciting ahead for fans, for players, for tournaments. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, fantastic points. I'm going to try to limit myself to 2 minutes because I feel I can talk about this for like 20. But tennis, like you said, 4th most popular sport in the world. It's really hard to compare tennis to the other major sports here in the US, right? We always talk about the 4 major sports in the US. They're all team sports, so it's very different. And tennis and golf get compared a lot. And one of the problems with tennis and golf, unlike the team sports here in the US and soccer internationally, there's no real salary floor for players, first of all, right? So there's such a huge discrepancy in tennis between what the top players make and what the bottom players make. It's really kind of a true free market, which we don't have in major American sports. There's been criticism, for example, of basketball. Should the maximum salary that LeBron James gets paid in his prime, why is it limited to 35 million when he's bringing in hundreds of million in revenue? It's not a perfect system, but one of the reasons I think it exists is it gives, Joe Schmo on the bench who's just trying to make a living a very high salary floor, given the athletes really have a very short career where they have earning potential. And tennis players don't have that, and they're on their own, which means a lot of the costs of breaking into the sport are fronted by the athlete. Unless they're on a big agency, they've got endorsements, they've been touted, they come from a country that gets wild cards at these events. You don't get that if you're Novak Djokovic coming from Serbia and working your way up. You don't get that if you're Marcos Bagdatis coming from Cyprus. You get it if you're Andy Murray. You get it if you're Andy Roddick, and you get it today if you're Taylor Fritz or Jensen Brooksby. But it's really not an equitable sport in a lot of ways. So I think transparency is important, right? The other problem with tennis is not centralized, really. You have the ATP that runs these master tournaments, and then you have the Grand Slams, which are all sort of run together by the ITF, but also sort of do their own thing. And that happened organically. I don't think that there was ever a master plan. Each tournament sort of started as an invitational. Hey, Bilal and Arjun, we want to invite you to come play in our tournament. And it morphed into a tour that had points and had a system. But now that you have this many fans, you really need to start thinking these tournaments need to work together, right? You can't have, we've had joked about it. We have tournaments where players sometimes are playing 5 best-of-3 physical matches day after day after day, no break. And then they got to turn around and travel to the next Masters event the week after. And over time, we've gotten more space between those events. We've gotten better scheduling, but it's still not all aligned sometimes. The grass season, we'll talk about, it's so short. The clay season is so long. There's no off season really. Like the indoor season is kind of random. Why do we have 2 American hard court season? Like all this stuff's really traditional, but there's not much centralization. I would say the final point, talking about technology, and we'll talk about this more next time. Tennis is the worst sport I follow about leveraging technology to get fans in. Why are we even doing this? Maybe we like hearing ourselves talk, but one of the reasons we're doing it is we couldn't find these sort of conversations on our own because, look, the Warriors win the finals 2 days ago. I can listen to 15 different podcasts about Steph Curry and the Warriors and the Celtics, and I can go on YouTube right after the game and hear analyses for hours, right? And part of that is the popularity of basketball in the US, but I can do the same thing for soccer or football abroad, right? I can find hours and hours of footage, and I have video games that are awesome, like 2K and Madden and abroad FIFA. And tennis is terrible video games for the most part. And tennis is terrible about posting highlights, right? Basketball, after every game, you miss the game, there's a highlight video. The NBA itself will put up a highlight video. They will leverage YouTube. They will leverage Twitter. They will get people excited for the next game. Yeah. Tennis, you try to find some of the matches we're going to watch later, you try to find a complete match. It's always someone's bootleg copy that they recorded off their VHS and they uploaded because the rights are owned by the Tennis Australia or the French Open, and they're so guarded about putting those highlights up. They'll put a 3-minute highlight video for a quarterfinal men's match. Why not show the whole thing? You want people to be excited. You want people to come in. So it's very backwards, and it's very much about, well, we want our rights, right? Because we want to sell these DVDs. Dude, nobody's buying a DVD, right? So like the content is not to be protected. We live in a world now, you want everything to be out there and open because you don't make the money off people paying to watch old matches. You make the money by getting people excited for the matches that are going to come. And that final thing is, we've talked about this offline. You have to track down where these matches are. Is it going to be on your tennis TV app? Is it going to be on the tennis channel? Is it on Peacock? Is it on ESPN? I know it's different country to country, but the fact that it's so confusing, even for diehards like us and other diehards to figure it out, you're not going to attract casual fans that way. So I think that hopefully they're thinking about these things. They're about 10 years too late compared to other major sports, including soccer abroad, including even a sport you can argue is not a sport like chess, which is leverage Twitch and YouTube into a huge following. Tennis has really failed. I mean, chess blew up after the Queen's Gambit went on Netflix. Yeah. Tennis had a similar opportunity to King Richard, but then what happens is people go on to find Serena Williams matches on YouTube, and they're all grainy home videos that people recorded off their VCR in 1999.
F1, you know? You saw how F1 blew up with the show, and about 10 years ago, I think 10, 15 years ago, the laws changed. They got a new president who changed everything. Before, everything on F1 used to be private. They didn't want anything on social media. And now they're allowed to post, players and drivers are allowed to post on social media, and that blew up the sport. And that's why it's such a huge thing going on in the world. So yeah, I 100% agree with you.
All right, we can talk about this more later. Yeah. Let's talk about grass season. So I told you each to bring one thought. I brought one too about the season. Arjun, you brought the new ATV Vision. We'll talk about more. Bilal, what was your biggest takeaway from the beginning of grass season heading into Wimbledon?
Well, I think one of the main things I took away was that Herbert Hercox is definitely, I'm mispronouncing his name, but I think he has probably solidified himself as a legitimate grass court contender now. You know, we all remember last season, taking out Roger at Wimbledon and in a dominant fashion, 6-0 in the third. But to follow that up this week with a resounding result at in Halle, or I feel like that was a significant win for him. Taking out Felix, taking out Kyrgios, winning every tiebreaker that he played, which I think is actually really crucial in grass court tennis, as we know. You look at the significance and success of Novak Djokovic. I think that's why he does well, is because he's so strong in those tiebreaks. So I think that he capitalized on a good week, beat some impressive players, and although he doesn't have the flashiest grass court game, I think we'll see him having more success down the road.
Yeah, we'll talk about Hurkacz, I think, once the draw comes out. Great week for him. He's won a couple big titles. He won Miami last year, or I think, was it last year? He won
last year.
Last year, he beat Sinner in the final, beat Roger. He's been in a semifinal at Wimbledon, right? It's a big deal. Yeah. He's kind of, I think he's one of those guys, he's kind of quiet, I think, off the court. He doesn't really have the game he doesn't have anything really flashy. Mm-hmm. Good hands, good on both wings. I mean, my issue with him would be, and it showed, he got into a lot of tie breaks, which happens on grass. I don't think his return is amazing. Mm-hmm. But this is the surface that will hurt him the least. The other thing, we'll talk about the seeding. A lot of it's going to depend on whose section he ends up. But we're going to talk about that group of 4, that 5 through 8 seeds. If he ends up in one of those 2 sections, which should be wide open, he might be a favorite to get to a semifinal. And then if you're in the last 4, who knows what happens? Arjun, you're going to talk about the other winner today, Matteo Berrettini.
I have a lot to talk about Berrettini, the 26-year-old, aka the Italian Hammer, Mr. GQ going on right now. He's been running a grass court empire for the last 2-3 years now. I think he won Stuttgart, he won Queens. He didn't face a top 25 opponent, but he took 3 months off, and the fact that he could immediately win 9 matches in a row in 2 weeks after sitting out for those 3 months, it just shows how the size of his weapons on grass and how he essentially takes the physicality out of the matches, and really just his game is just so dominant. He doesn't have to play those long matches to win. Going forward, like since 2019, he's 31-3 on grass. That's more than a 90% winning record. His real only losses came to Djokovic last year's final. Before that, the grass season in 2020 was canceled. He lost to Federer in 2019 after a 5-set long match. And he lost to Goffin a few weeks prior to that. But some of those 2019 matches could have been due to growing pains earlier on in his career. His weapons, I'll get to on in a second, but really dominate grass court tennis. But speaking about his wins, he has some notable wins on grass. He's beat Kyrgios, Khachanov twice, FAA twice, Schwartzman, Murray, Cam Norrie, Hurkacz last year's semifinals, Tommy Paul this tournament, Sonego. So he's got some notable wins, but against top 10 opponents, he's 2-2 lifetime. Only the 2 top 10 opponents were Khachanov, both wins. Then he lost against Federer and Djokovic. So it's kind of a small sample size, but we'll see how he does this tournament. The main reason he doesn't have matches against top 10 opponents, as we alluded to earlier, it's a short grass court season. And some of these top players, Djokovic and Nadal, they're not playing many of these tournaments. But he hasn't played Zverev, who won't be playing this Wimbledon, and Medvedev, who's not allowed to play this Wimbledon, and Tsitsipas, who we all agree we don't consider a threat. Then Alcaraz, we haven't seen his full potential yet. And Hurkacz may be a challenge, but he does have the upper edge against him. So really, it's come down to Djokovic and Nadal are the only ones who may stop him on grass this tournament coming up. But let's talk about his. I wanted to talk about his strengths, his serve and forehand. He's also nicknamed the Italian Hammer. So and he gets that name rightly so. His slice stays low, pierces a court, and he can use it as an offensive shot and defensive shot. I read a statistic that his backhand slice crosses a single sideline about 56% of the time. So that means on defense, he's hitting that long, deep, slow cross-court shot, making the opponent run and hit a very uncomfortable shot while running. So that's why he's able to neutralize a lot of rallies where he's being cornered, and he can flip those rallies and take them to his forehand, switch them to neutral and offense.
And Arjun, for the listeners, right? So that low slice on grass stays even lower. It skids. So that means it carries through the court a little bit more versus on clay where it kind of would sit up. And then the advantage there is you take away time.
Yeah.
And then the opponent has to hit up.
Yeah.
Setting up that forehand.
It makes them bend lower and in awkward positions. And if you're not hitting that correctly, the extreme underspin really can drive the ball down, or they have to really lift it up and they have a higher chance of hitting it out. But his backhand is also a reason why he might lose. We talked about this too. But I was watching his game today. It's not really the offensive or defensive backhand shot that hurts him. It's the neutral ball that hurts him. Anything in the middle of his striking zone, where normally people hit a normal, like good, stable shot, he actually has more trouble with it and may hit the net or hit it long. I was looking into it. So his grip, I think, is the issue. He has a very Eastern grip. On the forehand, an Eastern grip closes your racket head so you can hit more topspin. But on the backhand side, it does the opposite. It opens up your racket head. So that means you're going to hit a flatter shot, a higher margin for error, or lower margin for error. And it's almost like you hit the ball kind of like a baseball bat, and it sprays. Any mistiming, a little late, a little early, a little high, a little low, it'll spray. And he's not able to get under the ball like most players and hit topspin to kind of create a larger margin of error.
I love the baseball bat comment and the technicality, because he always looks awkward on that side, even when he hits it. And that grip change you're talking about is a great observation. I did not know before you brought it up, but it makes so much sense. And I think then, you talk about Nadal and Djokovic, and we can talk about this when the draw comes out. Maybe he ends up in their quarter, maybe he doesn't. But his biggest problem, right, is if you get him, they call that backhand jail. You get him stuck on the backhand side, going back with Djokovic, backhand to backhand cross court. Djokovic could do that 150 shots in a row.
Yeah.
Nadal, cross court forehands, he could do that 200 shots in a row.
Yeah.
And then everyone's also like, well, Berrettini hit a better backhand. Just take it up the line, switch it the direction. That's really hard to do when your margin for error is already so low. Now you have to try to change direction and take it up the line. And if you just bunt it up the line, it's going to get clobbered. So it's very tough for him.
Yeah, he can't hit. So yeah, exactly. On that neutral shot, he has to. That's why he goes to the slice so much, especially on grass. It stays lower. He can attack with it and come in off of it. His net game is phenomenal, but that's also secondary to coming in off strong shots. But yeah, that backhand. He's in London right now. It's we're recording this at 4 p.m. today, so it's he's gonna wake up in about 6 hours. He needs to wake up and go hit a bunch of backhands.
Hit a bunch of backhands.
Yeah, every day and between matches.
Bill, a quick Berrettini comment. I have thoughts in my head. Berrettini reminds you most of which former player?
For me, Andy Roddick, 100%.
For sure, right?
Like the backhand, it's actually funny because when you think about his elbow extension, it's very, very stiff. And I think that was Roddick's kind of limiting factor as well for him to limit. It wouldn't really give him the driving force from the left-hand side. It was a shot that he improved later on in his career to a marginal extent with Larry Stefanki. But I think if Berrettini can find some improvement down the road, I think we touched on this last time. I think his grass court game, which is already really strong, could really be elevated and even be a contender possibly on the hard courts later on in the fall. So again, it's a glaring weakness in his game, but I think his other components like the forehand, the serve, also his net game, I think is really impressive as well.
And his head.
Yep, exactly. Mentally, he's solid.
Yeah, he's a rock.
He's a fool. So
and that's why he reminds me of Roddick. I mean, they're different. I think Roddick's backhand was probably a little bit better, especially once he gets to Stefanki. Roddick was probably a better mover, especially when he was younger. He reminds me a little bit of older Roddick, where he definitely tries, but he's not a natural side-to-side mover. He's bigger than Roddick, right? He's 6'5" almost.
Yeah. That's one of the things I was also noticing, that he doesn't move side to side, and especially to his backhand side. No,
he doesn't move well. He's good up and down. He's athletic. He's an athlete. I mean, this guy started tennis late. He's a late bloomer. Like you mentioned Arjun, 2019. Remember 2019, no one really knew about him. Then he played Roger at Wimbledon, got crushed. Mm-hmm. Then he gets to the semis at the US Open. Everyone laughs at Nadal having this easy draw, getting Berrettini in the semis. And he hung with Nadal. I think he saved like 10 or 11 break points in that first set. And he showed you that head. Yeah. And so he and Roddick are similar, right? Big serve, big forehand, a little awkward moving around. I think he's maybe a better natural volleyer than Roddick, but the mental game, right? These guys aren't going to lose to anybody. I'd be shocked if he lost early to anybody. He's going to lose, in my mind, to one of the big two, and if anyone, maybe one of those other contenders you talked about. He's not going to, just unless he gets hurt.
Yeah.
I mean,
so just one last quick stat that I found on him is ATP publishes a couple stats. One of them is the under pressure, leaders under pressure. That includes that it combines points from break points converted, break points saved, tie breaks won, and deciding sets won. And Matteo Berrettini, he's actually number 2 on that list. Djokovic is 5. And you guys can guess who number 1 is. Nadal.
Rafa? Yeah.
So Berrettini is up there with the top 5 with Alcaraz, Ruud at 3 and 4, and Djokovic at 5. So,
well, I mean, he, given his limits, he you know what? He's so good mentally. He doesn't get nervous.
Yeah.
He's confident in his first and second serve. He picks the right serve. He's one of the few guys. I know Djokovic has beaten him a bunch, but he's one of the few guys. He frustrates Djokovic and Nadal on break points because he always picks the right spot. He goes away from where they're thinking. He knows his strengths. I think he leans in. If you talked about this, Arjun, he gets basically every first ball to his forehand. He is committed to, hey, I know my backhand is not as good.
Yeah.
He's not somebody who's going to try to hit backhand. Like Tsitsipas is the opposite, I think. Tsitsipas sometimes he's just like, I want to hit backhands with you. And you're like, why are you doing that? Your backhand is not as good as your forehand. Yeah. I don't care if it's pretty. I don't care if you think you look good. You should be running around that every chance you got. Berrettini he's got no bones about it. He will run around his backhand the whole match.
Yeah. He's a clutch player. He plays big when it matters, and he can close matches. So I think grass court it's his turf coming up, and he's scary when he steps up to the baseline.
So I'm going to save my Kyrgios stuff. So I want to talk about Kyrgios. Let's get to the seeds, right? So we just talked about tennis is confusing for some fans casually. Seeding can be really confusing in the way the draw works. So I'm just going to quickly outline it for those who may not know. So the way tennis seeding works, right? There's 128 players in the draw. 32 players are seeded. Now every tournament does it. All the Grand Slams do it based on ranking. So the seeds we're going to go through the top 32 ranked players who are competing at this year's Wimbledon. Everyone else in the draw, that includes wild cards who are given, usually that's a courtesy or a younger player given an opportunity. Qualifiers who played matches to get in, anyone who got in based on their ranking, they're just randomly spread throughout the rest of the draw. But seedings are important because that's how you project who you play. And the seedings are set up that number 1 and number 2 can't play till the final. And then 3 and 4 on opposite sides. So the categories are important are your top 4 seeds, your 5 through 8, because the 5 through 8 are going to be matched up in the quarters with your top 4 seeds. And then you've got your 9 through 12 and your 13 through 16. And the reason that's important, 13 through 16, they play number 1 through 4. 9 through 12, they play 5 through 8. And then the last group is you've got your 19 till, I think it's 8 people, 26, and then or it's 19 till 25, and then 26 to 32. Those last, 17 through 24, 25 through 22. Those last 16, again, the 17 through 24, they play the 9 through 16, and then the bottom 8 will play the top 8. And that's how we can kind of look at this. We're going to get the draw later this week. We'll talk about the draw when it comes out, but just looking ahead at the draw, right? So your top 4, Djokovic, Nadal, Ruud, Tsitsipas, 5 through 8, much more dangerous than your 3 and 4, maybe. Alcaraz, FA8, Hurkacz, Berrettini. Then you've got I sent you guys a list. We're not going to read through it for all the listeners. We can look at it. But Bilal, when you look at this, and let's say you're a Nadal or a Djokovic, we're all saying those are the 2 big favorites. What's a landmine draw? Like, so when you look at this, like, what's like the worst case 3rd round, 4th round quarter that you can imagine? Like, so your 3rd round opponents, looking at them, like for me, the worst 3rd round opponent, none of them are terrible. Maybe like a Dan Evans at home, like Krajinovic. But my point is, I think we're not going to see some sensational, if the seeds play out, I don't think any of these 3rd round matches are like, I wouldn't think of any of them as like blockbuster.
Yeah,
but 4th round gets interesting because 4th round you got Shapo, Cilic, Opelka, PCB. Are any of those concerning? Like, are they looking at those and being like, I don't want to play that guy in the 4th round?
I think the one you really don't want to play. Well, there's 2. I mean, I think Cilic, of course, right now is dangerous. I think he had a good week this week before losing to Krajinovic. But then I think Opelka is also scary because if you have a bad day on returns and you're just haven't found your rhythm throughout the tournament, first early rounders were not really challenging. You didn't really get the practice in. Opelka's the kind of guy I'm sure definitely gives Nadal and Djokovic a little bit of trouble sleeping at night before they go on court. Obviously, both of them great returners. They both played big servers on grass before. It's not been a problem, but it's just one of those. It's just one of those opportunities for you to really mess up if you're just not on par. I think it's more scary for. I would argue it's probably a little bit scarier for Nadal.
Yeah.
Just given that he doesn't have the same amount of conditioning on the grass right now. I think Djokovic has shown that he kind of picks up his speed a little bit faster on the grass as the tournament progresses. So I think Opelka is probably the scariest for Nadal. I think that's kind of a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I agree. With Djokovic, he can return the ball against both Cilic and Opelka off the serve. And Nadal can do so too. But yeah, Nadal doesn't have the feet right now. Can he hang against them too? We'll have to see. But yeah, Djokovic can handle those two, I think. And what's more scary is that the unseeded people. We can get into it now.
Yeah, we'll get to those later in a sec. And I would say one thing about Djokovic and Nadal. Nadal, if you look at all the returns, that's going to be Nadal fans say, well, Nadal's the #1 ranked returner in the year and all this stuff. I love Nadal, and I'm not a Djokovic fan by any means. Djokovic is a better returner than Nadal on grass. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's no bones about that, right? Like, Nadal's biggest why is he such a great return stats? Because if he gets you into neutral rallies, I've always argued that he's the best baseliner. I know Djokovic is known for his baseline play, but Nadal is if it's a neutral rally, if you're just starting the ball with a simple feed, he's probably the best because his forehand is so good. His problem return is he has to, on other courts, he buys time by standing super far back, looping the ball super high to get back in the point, and then he takes over. You just can't do that as easily on grass. He's going to have to stand in, and then he loses time on that forehand with the extreme. His grip is different on the two sides. So he has to make that rapid adjustment to a pretty extreme grip on the forehand. Djokovic doesn't have that problem. I mean, he literally can pick apart anybody if he's having a good day. If he's having a bad day, like you said, well, then anything, all bets are off. How about, before we move on to unseeded players, we got our 5 through 8. So our 5 through 8 is pretty legit, right? We got Alcaraz, hottest talent on the tour this year, didn't play on grass, missed it with the wrist injury, but everyone's saying, well, maybe we don't know what to make. Maybe he's a first round loss. Maybe he's a dangerous guy because of his mentality. Then we've got 3 legit grass court players. You can argue all 3 of them reasonably are better on this surface than Ruud and Tsitsipas, who are 3 and 4. FAA, Hercox, Berrettini. And that means 2 of these 4 guys are going to probably have a quarter where they are the favorite, which is huge, right? So again, how do you rank these 4 guys as contenders to win, Arjun, right now?
It would go Berrettini, Hercox, FAA, and then Alcaraz on grass. Exactly opposite how they're ranked. I gave my case for Berrettini, but Hercox has been playing phenomenal grass tennis, as we saw. FAA, he's been a contender on grass for a long time. The only issue is, as we were talking offline earlier this week, is that he's not a finisher. He can't close. It doesn't seem like he can close big matches. So when it comes down to in the quarters, in the 4th round, can he play can he level up like some of these other players do, Berrettini, Hercox, in the top 4? I don't think so. Alcaraz, I think we have no data on his grass court tennis. Even last year, he was in and out. So I'm not too hopeful on him, but I would love to see him win. But I think Berrettini goes the farthest out of these 4.
If he's in the right quarter.
If he's in the right quarter. And if he's not, he may lose to Djokovic or Nadal.
I think just adding to that really quick, I think just Alcaraz is I know we don't have the data, like you mentioned, Arjun, which is a great point, but I think game-wise, it's just my personal opinion. I think he will adjust the grass with time pretty well. If you look at his strokes, I think he hits a little flatter ball than I think it lets on. I think he can actually, the trajectory of his ball has I think it actually will have an impact on the grass. So I would actually favor him over FFA. I don't know if that's a hot take, but just something to throw out there. I'm not super impressed from this week's performance from FFA. I know we talk about the tie breaks and I'm not closing, but I think Alcaraz has more of that solidified mentality. So we'll see what happens, but just putting it out there.
Yeah. FA, like we talked about before, FA is getting to the point where until that happens, you can't pick him in that big match. I mean, just compare Berrettini and FA. I'm not talking about games, just talking about their performance in big finals. I don't care who they're playing, right? I'm just talking about Berrettini's 7-3 lifetime in ATP finals. The guy closes. His only losses In his third final, he lost to Christian Garin on clay in a third set tiebreak. Garin's a very good clay player.
Yeah.
He lost to Zverev in Madrid, which is like Zverev's castle, in a third set. And he lost to Djokovic in Wimbledon last year, and he won the first set. And he didn't get blown out in any of those matches. All three matches he took a set, he pushed them. Even Djokovic last year, everyone laughs about it. He took the first set, like he hung with them, and he didn't go away mentally. FAA's final record is terrible.
Yeah.
And he should have won in what was it? I can't even pronounce it. That the Dutch tournament, the Hergish Bosch. Yeah. And he loses to a Dutch qualifier, right? So it's like at some point, and it was a third set tiebreak. You can say, well, anything can happen in a third set tiebreak, but you can't get into those situations over and over and over again. Like even this week, he lost 2 tiebreaks to Hurkacz. You know, his tiebreak record is not great. He lost tiebreaks to Medvedev at Australia. I mean, so I agree with what you guys. I have the same order in my head, and I agree with you, Bilal. I think Alcaraz eventually will be. I think he's going to win Wimbledon one day. That's my hot take.
Same.
I don't think that's a big hot take. I just don't know if it's this year because we haven't seen him on grass.
Yeah.
So let's go to those unseeded players, right? So my point was going to be about Kyrgios, but I saved it for this because I was watching to see could Nick Kyrgios, who looked pretty good at times in Stuttgart and in he played Halle, right? Yeah, he played Halle. He looked pretty good in both tournaments, like legitimately scary.
Yeah.
Could he get seeded? Because he started the tournament 75 in the world. He ends up, I think, in the 40s. But if he had just won that third set tiebreak on Hurkacz, 7-4, he would be seeded. And I think all the top players would have loved if he was seeded because it could have pushed him off until about the third round.
Yeah.
But now he's floating and he could be anywhere, right? Yeah. Andy Murray, he could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Seb Korda, he could be anywhere. Maxime Cressy, serve and volley, could be anywhere. I think Kyrgios is easily the scariest of those guys, Arjun. But I mean, he's better in my mind. He's better on grass than easily half the seeds, more than half of them.
Yeah, I think Kyrgios, he's a top 5 talent for sure. And it seems like his mind is in the right place. He could have won that match that he just lost. But I think he needs to make sure it all comes together. He needs to make sure he's serving well, and his mind, most importantly, mind is mentally there. He has a slice, he has a big forehand, he has a big serve, all the tools you need for a grass court match and tournament. So
good hands,
great, one of the best hands, and so I and good returns too. So I think he can make some damage. He could easily be placed close to Nadal, close to Djokovic, and give them a run for their money. Maybe even beating Djokovic. He's never lost to him.
I would love. We all want to see that match, right?
That first round match would be great.
I mean, Bilal, thoughts on Kyrgios? Anything to add? We talked about it before, but we were talking about a lot these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think really 2 semifinals in 2 weeks is a great result for him. I think it shows moderate consistency, which is not something he's known for. I'm not saying he closed it out well, but he showed his stuff, beating Tsitsipas this week, playing some high quality tennis, and he was confident. You can tell, I think, the training that he's putting in, he's talking about it more, that he's practicing on the grass, and he feels like he can, for the amount he plays when he's not, fully there for the tournaments, he feels like he has a good chance against anybody. So I'm excited to see if we get that matchup, the Djokovic-Kyrgios one. I think it could be an entertaining one, but he's definitely a threat. And if he's focused and he doesn't get distracted, he can go deep. We all know that.
He looks like he's in better shape. I think the last time we saw him, he looked a little overweight. He's talked openly. We talked last time about his depression and not training. I think it sounds like he's gotten over that. For me, it's for him, mentality is both a strength and a weakness. And I'll explain why. I don't view him as somebody who will get tight serving in a big moment.
No.
He's not scared. Mm-hmm. He's not scared of anyone. There is nobody in the draw. I think actually the only person he had sort of reverence for is Roger. I think Federer, he never played against Federer. And I think Andy Murray is a garbage matchup for him, and he always struggled. And he gets frustrated when he plays Murray. We saw that last week. But that's why mentality is a weakness for him too, like you said, because he can get distracted, or worse, he gets in these fights with the umpire, and I was so worried about him. I feel like I want to petition Wimbledon, keep him on show court.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy, you stick him on some back court where no one's watching, the cameras are off. I think he does worse. He's better if he's got a platform. He's a big match player. So
Yeah.
for me, I think we'll agree. I think the biggest things I'm watching for the draw, I want to see where Kyrgios and Murray are. I want to see where are, like, none of those 5 through 8 guys are weak, but which of those guys get lucky and get Ruud and Tsitsipas as their section.
Yeah.
And then the final thing would be, you know, Opelka, Isner, kind of these guys you really don't want to play on grass. Where do those guys end up? The London weather, I was checking because I think the weather does impact how the grass plays. It was really hot a few days ago, and the next forecast for the next week is kind of rainy and high 60s. It'll be very interesting to see how that affects the grass. Halle and Queens, traditionally the players say they play faster than Wimbledon. But the draw, I mean, the point is, we were talking about, you could see a really unbalanced draw potentially. Thankfully, Nadal is playing. We didn't talk about this. We took it for granted. Everyone knows this. Nadal has said he is playing, which was in question when we recorded last time. If Nadal was not playing, this draw could be an absolute mess. Because your top 4 seeds would be Djokovic, Ruud, Tsitsipas, Alcaraz, and you could have essentially all the top guys in one half, just like we saw in French Open. All props to Ruud for taking advantage, but we had 5 of the top 6 clay players in the world on one half.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be as stark now, because at least one of Djokovic and Nadal and FAA, Hurkacz, and Berrettini are going to be in the same half.
Right.
But you can imagine a situation where those 2 and everyone else is on the other half.
Yeah, I think you pulled up a great point about Kyrgios. When he plays someone who's a little more emotional, he thrives on that. He thrives on people who show emotion. Djokovic, Nadal, Federer and Murray don't show any emotion at all. And he kind of gets irked by that whatever he's doing, the antics that he does, it doesn't affect them, doesn't make them smile, doesn't make them frown. They're not getting mad if they lose a shot. They're not happy.
Andy Murray's camp would like to disagree with you that Andy Murray does not show emotion.
Yeah, I was about to say.
He just directs all his motion towards them, not towards who he's playing.
Yep.
No, but yeah, so Kyrgios, he thrives on like the crowd and his opponent's energy, and when that's not there, when he's on a side court, I agree with you. He thrives on center court, and when his opponent is also showing signs of like a little unstableness.
I think part of it's matchups too, but part of it also, I think he likes Nadal more now. He has a little more appreciation. I think he really historically has not liked either Djokovic or Nadal very much.
Oh yeah, both of them.
Like, he's been very critical of both of them.
Probably, I think I remember one interview. He thinks that they have no life other than tennis.
And you know what? That strikes me a little bit of jealousy in a way. It's probably true. He has more diverse interests, but that it's part of it is also a little bit of envy, maybe, that like, well, the only reason those guys are better than me is because they spend 20 hours doing this and I spend 4.
Yeah.
And I could do that if I wanted to, but I want to spend 20 hours in my 24-hour day thinking and breathing and doing everything for tennis and sleeping for tennis and eating for tennis. And I actually agree with him. Totally. If he put in the same work as they did, I think he could hang with them and maybe be winning slams with those guys. But that is also a talent to be able to do that all the time. Not everyone, I think, can flip that switch and say, I'm going to do this everything all the time. There's very few players who have flipped the switch. And I think we're hoping for him. He's never had a coach. He still really doesn't have a coach. Like no one really wants to coach him, but like, if he could just like put it, like I would view like Wawrinka as an case example for him or anyone like that. He's like, you're 27. If you don't take care of your body, you're going to fall off a cliff in the next year or 2. You take care of your body, you could be doing this for another 8 years.
Yeah.
Get a hyperbaric chamber, start eating a vegan diet, start doing yoga and Pilates. You could be amazing for 8 years, or you could just completely disappear. And I'm glad he's flipped it. And I you know what? I've never been a Kyrgios fan in terms of like the personality.
Yeah.
I think the best thing in the world for him would be going deep, taking out a couple of big scalps and losing in the final.
Yeah.
I don't think winning would be good for him. I think obviously it'd be good for him to win a slam. I think he would win a slam and he would just throw it all away. I think he would just be like, I did it, and he would disappear. But I think if he felt like the pain, he's protected himself in some way psychologically from the pain of throwing everything into it and still losing. And that, I think, is what drives those top guys. I don't think Nadal and Djokovic get to where they are if they don't have some really devastating losses along the way. And I really think Kyrgios needs to get to that point and lose and feel in himself like, I actually really care about this. I don't want to lose next time. I want to go all the way. And I think that's what happened to Wawrinka. He played that great match with Djokovic. He threw his life into it. He lost that match in 2013, but he went away from that match and he was like, I really want this. And if I can hang with this guy, and if I keep doing what I can doing, I can win a slam.
Yeah.
So for me, my ideal is he gets the final and he loses and he feels it and he doesn't take it for granted and he comes back.
Yeah.
I have a counter to that. So I agree with you. I think like if Kyrgios actually did put in that effort, that I agree with the touch of jealousy, but I do agree with him too. If he put that time into it, I think he can like mirror some of that success. I have a weird thought, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think the ideal scenario for him is that once Andy Murray kind of croaks out and retires, he comes on as his coach because they have a good relationship between the two of them. I could see that being the one person who maybe could get him to be a little bit more inspired. I think there's something there. They have a good friendship. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying it would happen, but it would be cool. And I think it could actually kind of give him someone to look up to because I think he has a great relationship with Murray. They're good friends. And I think that would be somewhat interesting, who I also think is a great contender this season for the grass if he's healthy, hopefully.
I mean, he's older than these guys, but I also view him in a weird way. I know he hasn't had a coach a long time, but I almost view him as more coachable in some ways than a guy like Shapovalov or Tsitsipas or like these guys, or Medvedev today screaming at his coach, making his coach leave. Like Kyrgios has never really directed that much anger at his box. It's all umpire or at himself.
Yeah.
Right. And I just think I actually view him as somebody, like you said, if he respected that person, I think Andy Murray would just be like, dude, if I had 2 working hips, I would be #1 in the world right now. What are you doing? Right. Yep. I just don't know if I think Murray's going to keep going for a while. I don't know. I think
I think Murray's fine. He's already found his second fire, and he's just notching some good wins and hanging in there. So he's a contender for sure. Like he used to be one of the big four. He is one of the big four, but former big four. But he can knock out on a good day. He can knock out Murray, Sinner, Fritz, Schwartzman. Even FAA on a good day, even a Hercox on a good day. Those are tougher matches, but and Tsitsipas too. Yeah.
Anyone could be on grass. Tsitsipas is. I mean, Murray. I'm about Murray's age, and I don't have an artificial hip. Although some days it wakes up and I feel like I have an artificial hip. It's just really hard for him to play that. He can't. Like, he gets a day off in the Grand Slams, which helps him a lot, I think. But he can't play like 4 or 5 sets of physical tennis and then come back and win another one 2 days later. I view it kind of like Agassi towards the end, where he beat Baghdadis at the US Open. His back's falling apart. He could like will himself through that one match, but 2 days later, the guy couldn't move. Like and so for Murray, I would love to see one more like center court huge win. I think he deserves it, for everything he's done.
I think he'll get it. He's like on the come up still, and he can have that Showtime win. But then he might lose 2 days later.
Yes, he probably will. Well, we'll wrap it there. We're going to come back on Thursday, go over the draw. We'll have some actual things for the draw. What we'll do is we'll kind of go section by section.
Yeah.
What was that? Is it Friday?
Yeah.
Come back Friday. And thanks for everyone for joining. Bilal, Arjun, thanks for coming on as always as our experts. And we'll be back soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye, buddy.